Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Dublin Street United Church in Guelph, Ontario in Canada as we celebrate the life of Geoff Richards today. We are glad for those of you who have been able to join in person. It is good to have you here. Thank you for offering your care and support. Many of you will be offering voice today in terms of sharing parts of Geoff's story. Thank you for doing so. We are mindful as well that we have folks joining us online or will be watching this as a recorded service, and our best go out to all of those who are doing that today. The flowers at the front today are sent from Australia by Geoff's family, and you can interpret how they were sent however way you want. If you want to envision them coming by plane separately over the oceans and arriving just in time of the service, please do so. Or as Shirley reminded me, well, actually, there was another way they came. But anyways, that's up to you today. But we are grateful that their presence is here with us. There are a variety of folks helping in the service. Thank you to Betty and to Dawn and Neil for music today. Thank you. There are many folks helping from Dublin in a variety of ways between refreshments and setup and our live streaming people, and thank you all. And just a quick note that following the service today, you're invited to stay for refreshments on the front lawn. There are tables there for you if you would prefer to sit, and we invite you to make your way out. So please just make your way down the stairs and out the open doors, and our reception will be there. I have a few announcements for later, but for now, we'll leave that at that. For our friends online, you will have seen a land acknowledgement go up. And we just wanted to acknowledge that part of Geoff's concern for the world included Indigenous rights, and we are mindful of the territorial lands that we worship on, of the Adirondack, the Haudenosaunee today. Dear friends, we gather to recall and to honor the life of Geoffrey Richards. Geoff, as we knew him most here at Dublin, we gather here to add our support and love to each other. We gather together to remember the hope God offers in the face of new beginnings and fresh challenges. And we hear these promises of faith that greet us as we come together. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. When I look at the heavens, the psalmist replied, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established. What are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? Yet you have made them a little lower than yourself, God, and crowned them with glory and honor. Within these promises of care, a reminder of worth, we share our celebration of Geoff's life and his passions, and we look to God's presence and care to embrace us as we gather today. I'd like to invite Max Richards as he comes to light our memorial candle in memory of his grandfather. And as Shirley was sharing some of the story, they had a bit of a ritual around lighting candles in their family, and it seemed just normal for us to do that today. So Max, if you would. Our opening hymn is found in the red hymn books, the Burgundy hymn books, called Voices United. It's hymn number 239, How Great Thou Art. And for those here in the congregation, we will be singing verses 1, 2, and 4. 1, 2, and 4. And to our friends at home, those are the only verses that will show up for you at home. So we invite you to join along and sing. We do ask that you have your mask on when you're singing. We really appreciate you honoring that today. Thank you. I invite you to join with me in a time of drawing close to the holy as we pray. O God, whose refuge is sought and whose strength is needed, we gather this afternoon to remember a life well lived. We gather with joy and thankfulness for the life of Geoff Richards, Dad, Grandpa, how his life is added to ours. We gather with his memories nearby and his curiosity, keen thinking, and determined living on our minds. We gather recognizing that even with the full life Geoff lived, there are still parts of our lives that are naturally grieving and missing him today. O God, whose promises greet us with peace and who invites us to live with hope, we gather in the knowledge that you are found in beginnings and endings, and your love has a way to turn even death into a new moment. In your presence we gather, as we remember Jeff with us and with you today. Amen. Today we will share in the telling of Jeff Richards' story. And I'm sure that there are things that you know, others that you will learn, and maybe there'll be a few things that you'll talk about over refreshments after the service. Jeff lived a rich and extensive life in his 81 years, and I have the privilege to begin our remembrances for today. Geoffrey David Richards was the oldest of 4 boys of John and Sylvia Eloise Richards. Jeff was born on October 2nd, 1940 in Melbourne, Australia. So for those of us who were wondering, was his accent Australian? We now know, Australian. He attended various schools, both in Hawthorne and Melbourne, including Scotch College. He went on to earn his Bachelor of Science at the University of Melbourne. He even earned a scholarship for medical school. Yet for Jeff, the world called out to him, and he took a different path than medicine, the one his parents had hoped. But Jeff wanted to see the world, and that he did. Over 50 countries in all, he traveled across Asia and Europe in 1965, seeing places like, get ready, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Burma, now Myanmar, India, Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, Bulgaria, Greece, catch breath, Yugoslavia, Italy, Austria, West Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Britain. He eventually made it to Canada, where he was doing graduate work. And there he met Shirley at the University of Waterloo, and his heart was captured. Together they shared 52 years, and they had 3 children to raise and enjoy seeing their lives grow, Stephen and Lynn and Anne. And believe it or not, Jeff took off his traveling hat, although not all the time, and his plan to go to South America. So he planted roots here in Ontario, where he lived for over 50 years. Jeff worked as a chemist, a lecturer, and an environmental consultant, at times taking him overseas for further adventures. In his retirement, he continued his knowledge journey, which we'll hear a little bit more of in just a few moments. Jeff was a son and a brother, husband and father, uncle and grandfather. He enjoyed being a grandfather to Max and Maddie, Ivy, and Cecilia very much. Jeff was also a cancer survivor these past 20 years. He should have likely lost his leg, but with good efforts of medical staff, lots of research, constant walking, hiking, swimming, and treatments, he kept going right up to the days before he died. Jeff Richards died on the day of St. Nicholas, a saint to travelers, on December 6, 2021. Today we will remember Jeff in a variety of ways, and I'd like to call upon his son Steve to share a few more memories of his dad.
Jacket on no matter how hot I get, because my dad would have kept his jacket on. But I also have a hanky, as he would have, so I can dab the sweat off my forehead if it gets too hot. I wanted to start with thank you. Thank you to Dublin Street United. Thank you to all of you for being here. And I also wanted to recognize those who couldn't be here. We might have a couple of family members in Australia who have logged in live. I know his brother Marshall was intending to do that. It's a terrible time in Australia, but they will be watching it, the recording afterwards. He remained deeply connected to his Australian roots, and it was always important to him that my sisters and I maintained a strong connection to the family in Australia. So, as you've already heard, he left Australia in his 20s, and after years of traveling, which included several years in Africa, in addition to the countries mentioned, he landed in Canada where he met my mother. I have to say, growing up with a globally minded Australian chemist father in small town Ontario brought some very different perspective to us. It really opened the world to us. And when I was sort of reflecting on the traits that described him best, I was thinking about the fact that he didn't spend a lot of time lecturing us or telling us the kind of people we should be. He just demonstrated through how he lived his life. So I think the three things that come to mind in how I would describe him is the insatiable curiosity for people and places, past and present, humility. He never thought of himself as being the most well-read person in the room, even though he often was. And lastly, and maybe most importantly, he always had this sense for what was truly important. He never longed for any material possession ever, even when he needed it, including replacing his 15-year-old computer. He remained focused on family, financial prudence, as well as global affairs, and global affairs that have the most impact on society, in particular, the environment. So I think those three traits, the curiosity, the humility, and the focus on what was really important, they came together in really unique ways that were sometimes socially awkward, and maybe challenging at the time, but with hindsight, they were understandable and funny and actually quite admirable. So I think the best way to describe that is to provide some color with a few examples. We were reminiscing with, my wife Jen and I were reminiscing with our kids on the drive here on all the stories we have, on time he spent with grandchildren, and other stories, but I'll just share a few. He had this insistence on taking the cheapest form of public transport everywhere he went. And that resulted in him usually showing up late for things with a big pile of papers in many countries in the world. Sometimes that was local, taking buses and trains to see his youngest grandchild, Cece, in Hamilton, who he adored. Sometimes it was further afield. I remember running to jump on a moving bus with him in Sri Lanka. He was in his mid-50s at the time. And after getting to our destination and standing for 3 hours on the crowded bus, I complained, and he responded saying, "We got there for less than $1, and we met some interesting people along the way." So I think that sums a lot up. He also was very well known for his sweet tooth. While visiting my sister Lynn and I in the UK, we were at a B&B, excuse me, and I remember he was struggling to decide between the different English puddings on the menu. So he ordered all of them and ate all of them. He also, as we've mentioned, had a real passion for the environment. So he was cycling to work to reduce carbon emissions and save money with a corduroy blazer on, with his satchel in his basket, decades before it was trendy. He also loved to be in nature. He loved to swim in open water. He'd often venture out incredibly far from shore for an impossibly long time. And I remember one time as a child, he took me with him to swim across a small lake. of course without a life jacket for me. And when we returned, I remember my mother being terrified and furious, but that sort of summed him up. There was a couple of more examples I'll share that are from after he passed, actually. In a couple of the financial institutions that he dealt with, people told me how fond they were of him because he showed interest in where they were from and what religion they practiced. When I was cleaning out his desk, I found lists of questions to ask family members before a family gathering or meeting, or to ask a speaker before an interesting event he was attending. And that sort of summed up how he went about his life. Excuse me. So when I reflect on that, now that he's gone, I think that, you know, maybe I could be more curious, more humble, and more focused on what's really important. And that includes eating more sweets, taking public transport more, and cutting back on Uber, though I do enjoy talking to the drivers about where they're from. Thank you all for coming.
And I think I'll join you on the sweet one. I'm going to choose that as my takeaway. I'll have more sweets in memory of Jeff. I think I like that. One of the memories that you'll see from the front cover of the bulletin, you'll see a walking stick. For those of you who are familiar with Jeff, walking and hiking were a big part of who he was. And our special music for today, I think, captures that sense of walking and the presence that walks with us. Invite Neil to come and lead us in that song.
Your head up high, and don't be afraid of the dark.
Thank you, Betty. Beautiful. Part of Jeff's life was, after his retirement and moving to this area, he participated in a variety of ways. Shirley said it was to keep his brain active, but he just enjoyed being involved in so many different ways. So we have 5 folks sharing parts of the ways in which Jeff is engaged in his retirement here in the Guelph area. And so I'll invite the 5 speakers to come up. Some of you can sit in the side pews while you're waiting, and Barb is going to start us off from her work with him at Peer Learning. So I invite you all to come and share. And this is the part we didn't have a chance to talk about. And you're more than welcome to speak without your mask on when you're doing your speaking part. Thank you.
Well, my name is Barb McLeod, and I'm here to talk about how Jeff was involved in peer learning at the Guelph Wellington Seniors Association. But after Stephen's talk, I feel I know him better than I did before. In peer learning, in normal times, every fall and winter, we organize 3 discussion groups on different topics on different days of the week. And there's usually maybe 8 or 9 people in every group. And each participant does research on one aspect or subtopic of the theme and gives a 20-minute talk on which we all discuss afterward. For many of us, these discussions are an important part of our lives and also a lot of fun. Jeff has been involved in peer learning since September of 2009, when he took part in 2 discussion groups, Challenges of Our Time and How Strong is Democracy? By 2011, he was on the executive, and he continued to take an active part over the years as participant, group moderator, member of the executive, and later for 2 years as president. He was, in fact, scheduled to moderate a group in winter of 2022 on India, its past, present, and future. Jeff, as you probably know, was very knowledgeable in many areas, such as history, politics, economics, and current events, and he always kept his knowledge current and up to date. He loved a good discussion and always was able to bring a new perspective to the topic at hand. He had lived abroad in many countries and brought much of his personal experience of countries in Asia and Africa to the table. As a member of the executive, he did an excellent job of communicating with the people who produced our community guide and was a very thorough proofreader. As president, he helped inspire us and keep us organized. One member has commented that he was the life and soul of peer learning. We consider Jeff a good friend, and we will miss him very much. Our deepest sympathy goes to his family and friends.
I've had the opportunity to speak with Shirley a number of times over the last few weeks, and gathered some information that I'm going to incorporate into my talk. I'm a member of the Social Justice Committee, or the Justice and Outreach Committee here at Dublin, and so is Jeff. And a wise person from that committee said, when she saw the number of speakers, she said, there's going to be some overlap. And so there's going to be some overlap. I don't usually wear a jacket and tie to Dublin. Today I decided that I would, perhaps because Jeff always did. As Shirley recounted to me, he always insisted on wearing a jacket and tie when he came here. She thinks his stern Anglican upbringing in Melbourne and private school there was a factor. I'm unsure. Maybe it was because for Jeff, this place was a serious place. Not serious in the sense of dour, but serious in the sense that important, significant, and consequential matters to him were and are topics here, ones that he could engage with like-minded people on. On the lighter side, I must say that with his choice of jackets and ties, together with the Volvo automobile, long after his college and university lecturer days were done, he continued to have the professorial look down pat. Dublin was a place where Jeff had meaningful interactions with others and could share his vast knowledge. Among other places and groups he joined in his retirement, this was a place where he could exercise his brain. And oh, what a brain it was. It was like a hard drive storing many gigabytes of information. Most importantly, though, Jeff found here a place where he could join with others in earnest pursuit of social justice. Social justice is what Jeff was passionate about, plus the environment, climate change, and perhaps talking politics. Social justice, both for people in his community nearby and for people in faraway places around the world. Jeff was a longtime member of the Justice and Outreach Committee, and for 3 years, from 2014 to 2016, he served as chair, leading the committee's efforts. A review of some meeting minutes from this period showed the major initiatives were around climate change, refugees, poverty, homelessness, LGBTQ, and Indigenous issues. Fast forward to today, and the issues and initiatives are much the same. November 9th was the last meeting Jeff participated in, exactly 1 month or almost 1 month before his passing. He continued to be engaged right up to very close to the end. If true to form, at that last meeting, he probably raised a new topic, not on the official agenda, near the end. Invariably a specific topic and an issue he was moved at the time to share. Jeff was always keen to keep the discussion going. Travel was a point of connection between Jeff and I. Earlier, I mentioned that he worked on social justice issues for people in faraway places. However, many of the parts of the world were not faraway places to him. Both he and I traveled extensively, although Jeff to twice as many countries. And there was another difference too. Whereas I visited and traveled about in countries, Jeff truly and deeply experienced them. He learned their history, their customs, their cultures, their religions. South Africa, India, the DRC, Pakistan, and many others. In my head, I can hear him say the word Pakistan, his residual Aussie accent showing, rather sounding through. Jeff wanted to and did move among the people, and he didn't always pay attention to rules, details of official travel advisories, or common advice for Westerners visiting certain countries. He wasn't a rule follower, as Shirley puts it. Once in the DRC, he went out walking after dark and got picked up and placed in jail. I'll leave the rest of this tale to another's telling. It all worked out fine in the end, I'm told. In his work as an environmental consultant, Jeff traveled and spent extended periods of time in many countries on most continents. Most continents. I absolutely love the story Shirley tells of the time their son was in a distant place, a place very far south of here. He texted home because Shirley was in the hospital after a fall and broken hip. The text originated from Peru. What, said Jeff? He is in Peru, and I have never been to any part of South America? You see, South America is the one continent Jeff wanted desperately, but never got the opportunity to experience. Knowing this story now, I wish I had gotten the opportunity to poke him with this. Jeff, did I ever tell you about the time I was in Uruguay? Jeff liked to talk politics too. I recall an instance where he started in, well, the NDP. When he said this, he extended out the word well and emphasized each letter of the party name. Well, the NDP. And if he was especially engaged in the moment, his voice could rise an octave, easily. Well, the Swedes. Well, the Conservatives. Or perhaps his favorite, well, Stephen Harper. Then he would proceed in sharing his views on the latest shenanigans or outrage that either the party or Harper was up to. I never asked outright, but I got the impression that Jeff was not a conservative voter. I want to finish with a small sketch for you. It's coffee time after service here, and Jeff and I are engaged in conversation in the gymnasium. On more than one occasion, slowly, the coffee drinkers, people socializing around us would begin to thin out. The volunteer coffee hosts, servers for the week, would begin their cleanup work in the kitchen. They'd come out into the gymnasium, collecting remaining china, coffee cups. The custodian would begin gathering and stacking chairs and tables and putting them away. Finally, I'd look up and around, and almost everyone was gone, and I'd say, I think, Jeff, we should be heading out. Jeff would look up and around, and with a certain resignation, he'd say, yes, well, I suppose. We'd then head toward the double doors of the gymnasium and out another set to the parking lot. We said goodbye. He left, but his preference would have been to keep the conversation going for a while longer. That, to me, was Jeff.
Get this off so I can see. It's always a disadvantage wearing glasses when you have to put a mask on. Thank you, Shirley, for inviting me to say a few words on behalf of Jeff in concern to the groups that we belong to together. My apologies if I refer to notes, but in the shadow of my 80th year, I know better than to try to depend on my memory to say a few words. I'll start with the Guelph Share Club, as this was a long-time commitment of Jeff's, perhaps around 15 years, we think. And actually, both myself and my wife, Melody Wynn, we both belong to that and met him there. This Share Club concept arose about 20 years ago from the suggestion of a publication called the Canadian Money Saver that was initiated in the early 80s. And there are over 50 share clubs now across Canada. These are not investment clubs, but rather discussion groups, and other people have alluded to Jeff's passion for knowledge. And these discussions were all about all aspects of personal finance, not just about investing. Jeff was a very, very regular participant, even during the past few years of virtual meetings in the shadow of COVID. He was very keen, and he attended annual general meetings, all kinds of meetings that many of us in the room didn't attend, and he would often report back on it. I recall when we still had real meetings, he would be diligently listening to speakers and other club members, and he had a way of really diligently listening. And at some point, he would break his silence to make a comment with a very precise, fully enunciated, clear, slow statement that started something like this, and I won't do it justice, but you could hear it through the whole room. Well now, it seems to me that, and away he would go on some further consideration. He enjoyed the Share Club fully. The other shared experience with Jeff was the Guelph Wellington Men's Club, a collection of retired men, 250 to 300 members, and in existence for over 45 years. And Jeff was a recent addition to, this was a recent addition to Jeff's interests, as he was a member for less than a year. The club met weekly at the Italian Canadian Club before COVID, so Jeff, unfortunately, was only part of the virtual meetings online. The thrust of the club was learning, and that's being echoed again, and fellowship for retired men. Indeed, Jeff had already volunteered and lined up to make a presentation to the club about his involvement in and knowledge of Pakistan. So again, a very active member. Jeff, you are missed by me and by members of these two groups, and thank you.
I thank Shirley for this opportunity to share some reflections of my relationship with Jeff Richards. My recollection of Jeff Richards is largely from participation in discussion groups at Dublin. Several discussion groups have been launched here at Dublin as an outgrowth of a commitment to small group ministry. I was recently reminded that Jeff participated in a small group composed of about 6 men that met over a period of months about 15 or so years ago to discuss modern ideas. As with most discussion groups, it was an opportunity for companionship, learning from others, and reflecting on the opinions we hold. Jeff was always able to back up his comments with historical insights, and he was always interested in what people had to say. I remember Jeff being a keen participant in discussions, in particular discussions that had a strong social justice component, for which he had great passion. Though even discussions that didn't necessarily start out about social justice would often end up there when Jeff was involved. For a number of years until the pandemic, a group of people met most months to discuss a pre-selected article from, at first, the United Church Observer and later Broadview magazine. There was no firm commitment to participate regularly except for the leaders. People would come as they were able or were interested in the topic under discussion. Jeff was a frequent participant. Jeff always had something interesting to share, even if it wasn't strictly speaking on topic. But that was no matter because his insights and experiences informed his comments, which were always interesting and informative. And to be sure, if Jeff had something to say, it was going to be said. The discussion meetings always began with a prayer and a check-in. The check-in was an opportunity for each participant to share briefly something about their current state based upon a simple prompt. For example, a prompt might be, name something you particularly enjoy about spring. The idea was to gather people together with a fairly simple question and to warm up before the more serious discussion began. Often Jeff took this opportunity to launch into the full discussion. As I mentioned before, Jeff was keen, even passionate, about the ideas he held. When he had something to say, it was definitely going to be said. Jeff often shared his observations from his international travels. When topics of lifestyle and social practices arose, Jeff could draw upon his experience to illustrate an idea or an opinion, when for others it leaned more towards speculation. His recollections added depth to the discussions. It struck me that he had a particular interest and affinity for Pakistan and the people of Pakistan, which often figured in his comments during discussions about nations outside the North Atlantic part of the world. Jeff always spoke with knowledge and confidence. His experience and understandings mattered greatly to him, and his insistence reflected his confidence that justice should matter to everyone. I recall a discussion I was leading, which I thought had strayed much too far away from the topic, and I interrupted Jeff to bring the group back into focus. Jeff acquiesced, however, he was not too pleased. Jeff's experiences, opinions, and his confident participation were important to the success of the discussions he joined. Listening to Jeff was always interesting, and his enthusiasm for companionship, education, and discussion will be missed.
I've been asked to comment on Jeff's participation in the Dublin Street Men's Club, Men's Thursday morning coffee meeting. The Dublin Street United Church Thursday coffee meetings were started by Fred Howlett in December of 2002 at Williams Coffee Pub on Edinburgh Avenue. As the coffee group got established, it became the practice to reserve a group of 4 or 5 tables near the restaurant entrance for 9 a.m. on Thursday mornings. A quantity of mugs would be provided and a carafe of fresh coffee would be purchased using funds from the coffee fund tin, into which everyone deposited $2 or $3. The coffee supply would be replenished as required. Fred Howlett was the custodian of the coffee fund tin. Attendees included retired members of Dublin Street United Church congregation and guests, and weekly attendance ranged from some 10 to 15. Discussions ranged over a wide gamut of current events, politics, sports, health, and finance. Ivor Wright could be depended on to add a little levity to the discussions. Because of the layout, several discussions often would be occurring simultaneously. Geoffrey, with his background of extensive travel in Africa and South Asia, was involved in many discussions on the latest events occurring overseas. Jeff also was one of the best informed Dublinites on matters of current affairs. As one regular pointed out, you could always tell when Jeff felt passionate about an issue, as his voice would rise to where you could hear him across the room. When the COVID-19 pandemic occurred, the group readily adopted the Zoom technology for the Thursday morning meetings led by Wayne Kuhn, whom looked after the technical details. The Zoom format lent itself to a different routine where individuals, one at a time, would in turn comment on activities and their personal happenings that they found of interest. No longer did several conversations occur simultaneously. One of the side effects of the Zoom meetings system was that one could join the meetings from anywhere where you could connect to the internet. This winter I kept in touch from Florida, and on one occasion on board a cruise ship passing through the Panama Canal. The ease of connecting on the present Zoom system has the drawback of not getting together face-to-face in one location. So plans are afoot to have one meeting per month back at Williams. We will miss Jeff's enthusiastic participation in the Dublin Thursday morning coffee meetings.
Settled, Lori, we'll invite you guys to make your way back. Thank you. Pocket, maybe? Thank you all for sharing a bit more about Jeff, and yes, appreciate that. I've been a part of some of those groups and just, brought back some good thoughts about Jeff today. Some folks that know Jeff really well are his grandkids, and they're going to lead us in a prayer, a poem, a litany. It's called We Remember Them. You will, for the folks who are here, you will find it on the back cover of your bulletin. And for those at home, it will be on the screen. And we invite them to make their way up front, and they will guide this part of our remembrance today.
At the rising sun and at its going down, we remember him.
As the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter,
we remember him.
At the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring,
we remember him. At the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of the summer, we remember him.
At the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn,
we remember him.
At the beginning of the year and when it ends,
we remember him. As long as we live, he too will live, for he is now a part of us. We remember him.
When we are weary and in need of strength,
we remember him.
When we are lost and sick at heart,
we remember him.
When we have decisions that are difficult to make, we remember him.
When we have joy we crave to share,
we remember him.
When we have achievements that are based on theirs,
we remember him. For as long as we live, he too will live, for he is now a part of us. We remember him.
With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before God with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? God has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. I've known Jeff for all my time at Dublin, over 10 years. I knew him from discussion groups, men's coffee time, and his work with Justice and Outreach. You would think after so much time you would know someone well, and yet today, and in the days leading up to today, I learned so much more about this quiet person with deep questions. For one, I didn't understand how important walking was to Jeff. It wasn't that I didn't see him walking, I did. He often joined us on our summer trek and treats where ice cream and a stroll were in order. I would see him strolling the parking lot before a meeting or afterwards. I didn't link his walking with his cancer. Partly, he was more interested in talking about environmental issues, his concern for Indigenous people, his reading of the morning news. Jeff was interested in learning, discussing, sharing ideas as we have heard. His need to walk was to keep his leg well. It wasn't as important to the conversation. And yet I heard how much over the past 20 years he needed to travel to Toronto, have specialized therapy, go swimming. That wasn't a big thing. He loved doing that. And to walk regularly. Sometimes we can miss important understandings. Jeff worked hard to not miss those steps. He was always interested in talking about the ways the environment is sick or the ways we need to change our paths. From his engagement with Kairos to Faithful Footsteps, to solar panels, to endangered chimney swifts, Jeff made the connections between care for the planet and care for one another. He would make the phone call. He would attend the meeting. He would be present. He could be given a pass, but he didn't take it. He found a way to renew his strength for this passion of caring. Our reading from Isaiah today, which started our service, reminds us that people can grow weary from caring, doing the right thing, lifting a concern. One way Jeff kept his faith going was by being with others, having a coffee, engaging on Zoom, talking about the issues of the day. I have to say there must have been times when Jeff got frustrated because he was polite to wait his turn. And sometimes when the time to have the deeper talks came, the meeting had already run an hour and a half and people were anxious to head home. But Jeff would understand. We would just have a shorter talk than his heart had hoped. For he understood that something else was also important when we gathered together. That was being with others. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. Jeff found that being part of a community of faith was one of the ways that helped him. It was extended family. He leaned on this extended family when a granddaughter was sick and when Shirley was dealing with some health challenges. He asked us to pray, and we kept him in our care as he did us when we needed his care. Part of being renewed was knowing when to ask others to be there too. To walk humbly with your God. This captures Jeff in many ways. His life led him along many paths and allowed him to meet many people from around the globe. His approach to people was to learn about them, to share what he knew about them with others. He'd like to have, as we've heard, conversations, and he wanted to hear your opinion. For Jeff, walking humbly with God was lived out by doing justice. To love, show kindness. He did this in numerous ways in the past 20 years. He shared his love of learning. He offered insights from his journeys and travels about what he saw in other countries. And I'm so grateful Stephen reminded me of Africa, because he talked about Africa too, so I'm so glad you mentioned that. His desire to understand what more we could do. His curiosity about life and people led him to walk humbly, not only with God, but with others. Shirley shared how Jeff would walk their neighborhood, and when he was on his own, he would meet people, and he would start a conversation with them. He offered to show them the woods and the path in the neighborhood for the newcomers, so they would know where to go. And he even had a sense of adventure for a person with a poor leg. He often ventured into the uneven ground in order to get a better look or to see a little bit better. Shirley said he had sort of a daring side, and Stephen mentioned that a bit when they went for the swim. That wouldn't have been a side of Jeff you would have thought of, but he was a daring man in many ways. What does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God. Jeff has lived a life where he has shown us the first steps in doing just this. We would miss a big part of who Jeff was if we didn't see a person who lived a life which strived to do justice and love kindness and to walk humbly with God and others. We remember this part of Jeff's walk through his life today with gratitude. We remember all the parts of the stories that we have heard of Jeff's life today, and we say thanks for the ways in which those parts of his story have touched ours. And we give thanks for the ways in which Jeff's life and story continues, in the hope that God gives, and in the love that we hold for him. Amen. We take some time to pray, to gather our hearts and minds together. In the midst of our prayer, there will be a time of silence, and I invite you to use that time as you need, perhaps to offer words of thanks or to share where you are feeling today. You are welcome to do so. You do not have to speak your words aloud. You are welcome to use the silence. We will go through our prayer, and we will end with a traditional version of the Lord's Prayer. You are welcome to join in. If you wish to have the words in front of you, you can find it in the red hymn book at selection 914. 914. We pray together. Eternal God, whose love and power has shaped the world, and in whose strength we gather today, we are thankful for the special place we hold in the created order and the specialness of the world in which we live. We are blessed by this communion. We are part of a masterpiece of living connections, and we realize that one life has a place in transforming the lives of others and the world around us. Today we offer our memories of Jeff Richards to you. We thank you for the ways his life has brought insight and understanding into our living. We thank you for his caring, attention shared, his determination to keep going, his curiosity in exploring life. We give thanks for him. We have been blessed. We offer our prayers, especially for his family, his beloved wife Shirley, his children, Stephen and Jen, Lynn and David, Anne and Travis, and the 4 grandkids, Max and Maddie and Ivy and Cece. We give thanks for his brothers, Marshall, John, and Ronald, and their families, plus the additional family and relatives in Australia and around the world. God, we pray for all of the people in Jeff's circle of care and connection. We think of neighbors. He toured the neighborhood in Rockwood, the folks from the various groups he offered his energy and skills. Peer learning, justice and outreach, community, share club and men's club, discussion groups at Dublin and men's coffee cache. There was also church friends and ecumenical and interfaith companions, fellow travelers, people of various global communities who welcomed Jeff, and Jeff welcomed them. Co-workers at Fanshawe College, strangers he just started chatting with, all of us who knew him in a big way or small way. May they feel your care today. Hear, O God, the prayers of our hearts and minds as we remember Jeff. Eternal God, as we remember Jeff in your care already, we pray for your love to hold us with good memories formed. May the beauty of creation lift our spirits. May we see how we can be instruments of hope and love and transform the part of the world we are touching and offer our voice for change and healing. May we make a difference in the lives of others. As we strive to do justice and to show kindness and to walk humbly. In Jesus' way we pray, and we offer these words from the Lord's Prayer to end. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. As we've mentioned, Jeff's love of the world and the environment and the creation. Our closing hymn is number 226, For the Beauty of the Earth. So as we come to the close of our service today, Wanted just to make a couple of further announcements. Just a reminder that we'll have a time for refreshment and story sharing on the front lawn. We invite you to stay if you are able. We also wanted to name that a tree will be planted in Jeff's memory in the Arboretum here in Guelph. And we hope that you could hold this date, October 2nd. It may ring a bell. That was Jeff's birthday, October 2nd, and this fall at 2 o'clock. And we're going to the Arboretum Center, a favorite place where Jeff liked to go. And they're going to have a walk. And they're going to have a bench dedicated to Jeff on that time. So if you can join us on October 2nd, you are most welcome at 2 o'clock for that dedication. So on a day of celebrating a life lived, remembering when death comes close, and the hints of new life that greet us in the air, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace, both now and every day. Amen. Don is going to lead us out by playing Amazing Grace. We would invite you to let the family follow him out first, and then as people are exiting, we may invite your way out. Please make your way down the stairs if you're able. Please make a left turn and head out to the front lawn. If you have to journey on with your day, we understand. Thank you, Don.